What have I got? Stars.
Gaming's not just a hobby. Gaming's a way of life, a drug, an addiction. And this is the extra content to keep you moving. This is your Day 2 update. What's up, everybody? HULKingyoda here, ready to bring you guys another review. This time, I've traveled all the way back from the underworld to give you guys my thoughts on Devil May Cry 5. So here we go.
We've known each other a long time. Hold the line! Hold the line! Nothing gets through! You never had this much trouble. You gonna make it through this?
They're demons!
So some of you may be wondering how this is Devil May Cry 5 when it is actually the 6th game to have that name attached to it. That 6th non-numbered game was DMC, an attempted reboot of the franchise by a different developer than the previous games. Now, that developer is Ninja Theory, who is a very reputable developer, and the game was a very solid game. But for fans of the Devil May Cry series, it really just wasn't something that they wanted. It didn't sell all that well comparatively to the other games, and I feel this is one reason why Capcom put the series on the shelf for a while. I say this to avoid any confusion as to the continuity of the overall storyline in the series. This entry acts as a direct sequel to DMC 4, not acknowledging the attempted reboot at all. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad that that's the case. As I said, DMC was a solid game. It just not what a lot of fans, myself included, wanted. So in 5, the story picks up sometime after the end of 4, and Nero, who was the main character in 4, is helping to run a branch of Devil May Cry, the demon-slaying service that Dante started. And this branch is actually being run out of a van that he travels from job to job in with his partner, Nico. So as is shown in the preview trailers leading up to the game's release, we see that Nero has a new robotic arm, which is called the Devil Bringer, which has been crafted for him by Nico in place of an arm of flesh and blood. So early on in the story, we find out that due to a visit from a shadowy stranger and that visit's outcome, that this is why Nero is down an arm. So I'm not going to divulge the specifics of that visit for spoiler reasons. So soon after this happens, and with his new Devil Bringer arm, Nero and Nico take off in search of the mysterious man who took his arm to exact revenge and find out why he did it to begin with. So this takes them to Redgrave City, which has recently been overrun with demons who seem to be coming from this giant demonic tree that has sprouted up out of the ground in the middle of the city. This tree is referred to as Cliffith in the game, and we find out that it has been planted there by a demon king calling himself Urizen. As Nero and Nico begin to explore Redgrave City, fighting through hordes of demons, they come across a mysterious character calling himself V, who apparently had hired Dante and his faithful duo of Trish and Lady to take out this demon king Urizen, but had become separated from them. So armed with this information, V and Nero team up to find Dante, Trish, and Lady, and ultimately to take down this demon king Urizen and his demonic tree, Cliffith. So I'm not going to go into any more story details from there, as I feel that honestly everything after this point would be some kind of a spoiler, and I feel it's a good launching point to say that from this point on is where you really start to get that forward sense of progression from the story. I will say my overall thoughts on the story were extremely positive, though. I thought that all the characters are great. They were well written and acted. I love the mystery and ultimately the revelation of who V was. And I actually like Nero in this game. And I say that because I really wasn't the biggest fan of him in DMC 4. The way the story was presented within the mission structure was well done and unique, I thought. Taking place over days, months, hours, etc. Specific times of each day or month were stamped out there for you to see, so you can kind of follow along and understand, okay, this took place before this, but this next event on this next mission took place, at a different time frame from a different character's perspective. So the character development was great for all characters, and I just had a lot of fun watching and listening to the banter of Nero and Dante. They were pretty funny when they got on screen together. V was also great, but in a different way, and that he was very stoic and reserved, but intense at the same time. This difference in character also translated into each one of their combat styles, which I will gladly get into very shortly. So hands down, though, best DMC story in the franchise so far, barely edging out DMC 3, in my opinion. The story has a great payoff in the end, and ultimately, I never felt like the developers were rushing it or, on the other end, dragging it out. So moving on from the story to the graphics, I'm just going to say it. The graphics were amazing in this game, particularly in the cutscenes when you can see the character models up close and the details within them. So, for example, the pores on their faces, stubble from a beard growing in, the etching in their jackets. You get the idea. I loved and ate up every cutscene due to this attention to detail. And obviously, there's a lot of really awesome over-the-top action going on in these scenes, which was just really cool to watch. The environments themselves, they look good as well, but they did not have that extra attention to detail that the character models had. Some environments even looked a little pre-rendered, which I know they weren't, but that look was there. And I mean, honestly, in defense of the environments, most of them were destroyed buildings and city streets or demonic-looking hellish tunnels and areas that were, you know, you've seen it before in other games. They're like a cross between muscle tissue, skin, and stone architecture. But overall, though, the graphics were top-notch, and I'd probably put them at the very top of the middle tier of graphics out there. Not on the same level of, say, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, or Red Dead Redemption 2, but I would say just below that. As for the sound in the game, obviously with any Devil May Cry game, you have to start with the music. The battle music is just as heavy metal as usual and is great to slay demons too, get you really pumped up. And the game also does a really great job of changing things up when needing to go to a more traditional orchestral score, matching the tone of certain cutscenes and key points in the story. The voice acting, man, is just top-notch as well, with Capcom having hired some of the biggest voice actors in anime to voice the main characters in the game. Dante is still voiced by the same actor who has played him throughout the entire series, which I thought was awesome. The sound effects for the swordplay, gunplay, explosions, demon noises, all that, they're all great and they fit well within the context of the game and the game world. And the different weapons also do a good job of each having their own unique sound to them and the actions that they perform. So overall, I thought the game did a great job in all areas of sound as well as graphics. Now, the final piece of the game that I'll be talking about is the most important one, the gameplay. Now, Devil May Cry has always been known for its flashy, fast-paced combat, and it doesn't disappoint in this entry either. Now, one of the really cool things about combat in this game, though, is that since you play as 3 different characters, there are 3 different styles of combat. When playing as Dante, we have the classic Devil May Cry fighting style with a twist. Now, those of you who have played this series before know that Dante is known for his sword guns combination of gameplay, using his trademark sword, Rebellion, and twin pistols, Ebony and Ivory. He's used other weapons before, sure, including a guitar, among other things, but in this game, I feel the developers went all out, giving him not only his sword and pistols combo, but his own Devil Bringer for a hand-to-hand melee style of combat. We also get a set of nunchucks and an actual motorbike that is used as a heavy weapon type that you can actually sling around melee style, as well as you can actually hop on temporarily and mow down any enemies in his way. As far as ranged weapons, in addition to your pistols, Ebony and Ivory, you also get a shotgun and a rocket launcher that you can alternate between as well. And all of these weapons obviously have unlimited ammo. Now, the game is set up to where you can fluidly transition from one type of weapon to another, as well as transitioning the styles of combat that you want to be fighting in. There are 5 different styles of combat, including Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, Royal Guard, and your Devil Trigger form, which you can transform into Dante's demon form and do massive damage, as well as take on less damage for the duration of the length of the Devil Trigger bar, of which is filled up by doing your crazy combat combos and such. The different styles of combat are mapped to your D-pad, and you can easily switch between those as you're switching weapon types that you're using as well, All of this while you're in combat. And I mean, honestly, once you get the transitions and combos down, you really feel like a badass once you're stringing these all together. And this is why Dante was my favorite character to be in combat with, because I thought all the elements came together to just make you kind of sit there sometimes as you're controlling it and surprising yourself and just be like, wow, that was really cool, man. There is also one final weapon type that I'm going to leave a secret for you guys to experience while you're playing the game. And I thought it was really interesting and quite humorous, to be honest with you. Brought a little extra fun to the combat that was already there. So next, let's talk about Nero's combat style. So, of course, for melee purposes, he uses his famous sword, the Red Queen, which is very similar to Dante's Rebellion. But Nero moves a bit slower, in my opinion, on his swings than Dante, which I thought added a sense of weight to the Red Queen. His combos are just as flashy for the most part as Dante, and they do share a lot of similar animations and outcomes, but I still don't think he was as slick looking, in my opinion, with the swordplay as Dante. But maybe that's a little biased on my part because I love Dante as the character here. But the big difference between Nero and Dante, however, is Nero does not use guns.
Crazy.
He has the Devil Breaker arm that we were talking about earlier. There are many different types of Devil Breakers that you can use and acquire throughout the game. Some just by progressing through the game, others by requesting Nico's services and having her craft them for you. It acts as a long-range weapon in the sense that you can grab enemies from afar and bring them towards you, or after launching an enemy into the air during a combo, you can grab them with your Devil Breaker and pull yourself to them in the air while continuing your combo. Now, most Devil Breakers aren't just about the melee aspect of the weapon either. There are certain charge attacks with elemental properties and different stat and combat boosters that you can utilize based on which Devil Breaker you're wearing. And whereas when playing as Dante, you could switch between fighting styles on the fly, the same concept applies to Nero and his Devil Breakers, meaning you can alternate between whichever Devil Breakers you have equipped in your inventory to chain together some really cool looking combos. Nero also has his own Devil Trigger form that he can change into as well. Now, the final character's fighting style to talk about now is V's. V is very unique in that he himself never lifts a finger to attack enemies. Yes, you heard me correctly. V has the ability to summon a shadow form of a panther, as well as control this talking, flying creature that travels with you at all times. In addition to these two, there is a third giant golem-looking character going by the name of Nightmare that can be summoned when V's combat meter is filled. The buttons and combo approaches are the same here as the other two characters' combat styles, but it's these creatures that are doing the attacking while V pretty much stands back and reads his book. Reading the book is actually an action that you can choose to activate, and when you do so, you actually recharge your meter as long as V continues to read and is not attacked by an enemy or hit by an enemy. Now, the Panther acts as V's melee attack distributor, with the vulture creature there for long-range attacks, and Nightmare serving as kind of a let's wipe out this whole area in big fell swoops. I really enjoyed V's combat, to be honest with you guys, which is great because, to be honest, it didn't start out that way. It had to grow on me. But in the end, I actually thoroughly enjoyed playing as V, and once I got used to his combat style and how to string the combos together and utilize the different character types, it was a really, really fun experience. So that pretty much covers all these characters' fighting styles, but I need to reference one piece of gameplay that complements the fighting, and that would be the leveling up system and the shops that are either at stands throughout the levels that you're in, or, believe it or not, a lot of times you can actually use a phone booth, which is in the environment, to call Nico, who will come speeding into the area, all crazy, fancy, flashy style, stunt-wise, and the Devil May Cry van, from which she will sell you upgrades to your weapons, allow you to purchase abilities and upgrade them, as well as increase your health and Devil Trigger gauges. Now, you are able to perform these upgrades and purchases by using the red souls you collect from fallen foes and breakable objects within the environments. And most of these upgrades and purchases I thought were fairly priced, but honestly, there were a few things that I felt were astronomically high as far as the amount of souls that they required you to hand over to purchase these things. But I did feel like the placement of these shop stands and the phone booths, they were really well placed within the levels. And to be honest, when they did pop up, 9 times out of 10, it meant that there was a boss coming. And I thought that was great. So you don't just blindly go into this boss fight and you're vastly underprepared. You don't have health orbs. You don't have, maybe you had a bunch of red orbs that you acquired in your exploration and you could use those orbs to upgrade abilities or your health or devil trigger gauge or buy new devil breakers or whatever the case may be. So it was really nice of the developers to place those in those locations as they did. But as far as the environments and general exploration and gameplay outside of the combat, the environments, they're linear, and there's only so many directions that you can go. And as you explore and fight enemies, there are breakable objects within the environment that give you different orbs for different purposes, i.e. red for currency, green for health, etc. You may come across environmental hazards, such as floor or wall spikes, and have to time your progression accordingly, as well as some traversal sections that require you to time and place your jumps correctly. But the levels do have collectibles in the form of health and devil trigger upgrades that are hidden throughout that require you to figure out creative ways to get to them. But otherwise, it is all about that forward progression. But in the Devil May Cry series, to be honest, the focus has always been about the combat and not the environments or exploration. And that does not change here, which I did not mind. So, ultimately, with all that being said, my final thoughts on the game were very positive. Ooh, yeah. The story, characters, and gameplay kept me fully hooked for the 16 hours or so that it took me to play through the game. And being a longtime fan of the series, it was nice to see it go back to its roots and focus on what made the series popular in the first place. The game comes highly recommended by me if you're a fan of the series, and I would even still recommend the game to you if you've never played a Devil May Cry game before. So when it comes to whether I would recommend a download, rent, or delete, I'd say it's definitely a download for the reasons that I just stated, as well as if you're okay with a shorter experience and not looking for some kind of epic 50-hour campaign. Now, I will say that there is a ton of replay value here if you want it, with higher difficulties to play on, level-specific challenges to go after, maxing out all your character's abilities with multiple playthroughs of the missions. So, I mean, you could turn it into a 50-hour epic if you wanted to, but if you don't want to do those things and you still aren't sure about $60 for a shorter experience, then I would say definitely at the very least, rent it. But all in all, my final score for this game is a 9 out of 10. So check it out, and once you get the combat down, I promise you'll have a lot of fun with this game. So that's all I have for this review of Devil May Cry 5. Thank you guys for listening, and as always, until next time, your Day 2 update will continue to download.
What have I got?
Puffy!